Good evening and welcome back to the Band of Badgers this evening. This is another of our Q&A sessions with Free League. Good evening and like our previous Q&A sessions in room last month, we welcome back this evening Matthias Lilja. Welcome Matthias. And I'm of course joined this evening as well by co-host Lee. So welcome Lee. Thank you for coming back.
No, I'm glad.
We won't do the normal introduction. This is all about Free League tonight. It's all about, in particular, the game Coriolis, the Third Horizon, which Matthias actually works on the first edition for, and he's now come back as a writer on Third Horizon at Free League. We'll get into that in a minute, but a bit about our channel. So this is Band of Badgers. We do many different TTRPG streams throughout the week, and these Q&A sessions as well. And if you would like to support us, you have a Twitch Prime account. It's very easy to do so. There are some instructions in the link that's in chat at the moment. And your support is much appreciated. So again, thank you for joining us tonight for our Q&A session. Matt, if you'd like to introduce yourself, let people know who you are and what you do, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, the reason I'm here is I'm a partner at Free League, and I'm designing games and having fun. A lot of that is about Coriolis, which is a game that I wrote I was the lead designer on the first edition, and then Free League picked it up and made a gorgeous and great second edition that I now return to as I joined Free League, which is, so I've come home and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Well, thank you for joining us again. Of course, you was on previously on Simba Room. So we are going to talk about Coriolis tonight, as I said, and thank you again to Free League because we do have some giveaways. There are some PDF copies of the core rulebook which will be given away in chat tonight. So Dave, who is silent in the background of Zoom, I can see him beavering away, typing in the background. You won't be able to hear him or see him, but he is there. He'll be putting some keywords into chat as we talk to Matt this evening, and you stand a chance of winning some PDF copies of the core rulebook. And we do also have one copy of the physical book, and the physical book I have here in front of me is everything. You can't see it because of the background, but we will have a mini cam view a little bit later on. It is everything you need to play the game in one book. It's got everything in there, and you'll have to trust me when I say the quality of the book is excellent, and hopefully we'll get to portray that to you this evening on stream. Now, the way you win this physical book is by asking Matt questions. So at the end of the show, Matt will decide the best question from the audience, and that person will win the physical copy. So there's your incentive. All right, if we want to kick off, I guess the first question, the obvious question, Matt, if you were introducing this game to new players, what is the best way to describe it? So this goes back to actually something we were talking about off stream, is basically what's the elevator pitch for this game?
Yeah. Coriolis is a sci-fi game. I would call it a soft sci-fi game. It's based on the idea that mankind has reached out into the star system through portals, and ships travel like caravans through the desert of space between oases that are space stations, Coriolis being the main one. And you play a crew on a rusty old ship, and you have your reasons for travel through this third horizon, as it's called, as part of space.
So it talks about in the introduction to the book, and again Lee picked up on this as well. There's the what you do section. So it very much brings new players, not necessarily even new players to Coriolis, but new players to RPGs as well, into the concept of stepping into this other role. One other thing I liked is it also cites some places to go to get inspiration. Now it talks about Alien. It talks about the Alistair Reynolds novels, and I actually think it's got a touch of The Expanse to it as well.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
And I really liked that in the book. Is that something that you carried in the first edition as well, or is that something that Free League has brought into the second edition in sort of the not necessarily simplifying, because simplifying has some negative connotations sometimes, but making the game more approachable?
We talked about it early, of course, and we do that. I think part of our creative process is why do we want to make a game? What do you play? We often focus a lot on what do you play. In Coriolis, you're a crew on a ship, so you belong together on that ship, and you need to decide as players on the reason why you travel, why you're there. You have a nemesis, somebody who doesn't like you for whatever reason. Maybe you owe them money, you stole their ship, or you insulted them or something, and you have a patron, somebody you can go to for information or missions or however you want to view it. So there's a setup where you can start playing the game. You don't need to know a lot about the setting. You just have to decide on who you are and why you travel. Maybe you want to, maybe you're forced to, or some combination thereof. But we also, when we start, apart from what do you do when you play, we talk about what's the world, why is it cool, what inspires us. And since there's a horror element in Coriolis with the dark between the stars, we leaned into Alien on one hand and Event Horizon, the movie, if you've seen that, on the other, like more of a different versions of horror in space play really well in Coriolis. But we also have this clash of cultures, or not necessarily clash, but merger of cultures, and how they meet and resolve things is also in there. So we have a lot of historical references that are not necessarily, some of them in your face aesthetically speaking, but there are others that it's harder to see. But if I tell you, you probably know, I'll recognize them. So yes, we work a lot with references to make it easy for people to get the feel or an idea of what could you do in this world, and what really happens, what are the dangers or opportunities for traveling the space lanes, or even opening up new space lanes. You could do.
So you mentioned a couple of things there. I'll go back on. So one of the things that you cover in the first part of the book is creating your team. And before you've even decided what your own personal character concept is going to be, you're actually deciding what your group concept is going to be. And that seems to be a key feature of the game, is that social reason for being together aspect, and having a common goal, not an individual goal, but a common group goal. Yeah, and it goes back to making it easy to start the game. And I think it's important in every game to do that, but it's even more so in a sci-fi game where the range of possibilities in the world of high tech is almost limitless. So you could try to create whatever character you want. So giving people first off, you're on a ship in a small crew. You have a role on that ship that matters. You do something important on board that ship that is needed. And why are you together? What's the purpose? Are you traders? Are you mercenaries? Are you free thinkers running from an oppressive government, or are you missionaries for some faith? Whatever you do, or maybe you're traveling circus, I don't know. But there's a number of you can do a lot of stuff, right? But you need to decide why you're on that ship together. Then you can have individual goals if you want to, but the purpose is more of quite a lot through the nemesis, right? You have a common enemy at least, and the need to get some money to keep flying. That's also important. So that's how we want to start it and make it easy to get into. You don't really need to know more than that to get started.
Yeah, that brings up 2 points from me. I really loved that there's a buddy system built into it. Like, you have a best friend, and that you decide who that is at character creation. That was one of the things I really loved. And we also had an audience question that sort of leads into it. Maybe you can expand a little bit more. Is from Baron Snowhand, wants to know, how easy would it be for someone who has never played a TTRPG to pick up this game and play it?
I think that on whatever arbitrary scale you use, I think most Free League games fall into easier part. It's easy to get into because of how we structure the starting point. It's easy. It's mechanically fairly basic, and with sometimes optional ways of making it more complex. But the starting point is often easy. You create the group, a character, and you have a pretty clear goal of what you're supposed to do, which makes it easy to start. Of course, the burden always in TTRPGs is on the game master. So, but with a GM that has some experience, it's no problem having everybody being newbies in a game like Coriolis.
And being easy to get into does not mean there isn't a depth to the game. So one of the things you pointed out is that everybody has a role in the group, and it is clearly outlined during the group and character creation section that everybody has a role on that starship. And then when you get later on in the book and it talks about ship combat, everybody's role plays into that turn. Like everybody has a turn, they have certain things to do, and it walks you through very clearly in the book on how to run ship combat. But that is actually quite a complex mechanic, although it is easy to get into, and that is prevalent through the game. I have to say that's one of the things that he's done really well, and I really like. So one of the other things I wanted to go back to, and I know Lee will want to talk about this as well, is the concept of darkness and darkness points. Because as a GM, I really like the idea. I really like that mechanic. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. It goes back to the idea that we wanted to highlight humanity's frailty or fragility, sort of how small we are compared to space. So we gave that darkness some character. It's not just cold; it's inhabited by some sort of evil that don't like you, and it can often happen when you're asleep. During jumps between star systems and stuff like that. But it also features in the game mechanically in the form of darkness points, which is something that the GM gets and can spend to make the PC's life worse. Which is, and in a fun way, not to break not to break the game, but something that can be routine in a normal circumstance the GM can force the players to roll dice to succeed with something simple based on the fact that the universe is conspiring against the PCs in some fashion. So that's where the darkness point mechanic came in. So it's a bit of a simple system that we think encourages the GM to throw monkey wrenches into the plans of the PCs in hopefully a fun way. It causes friction in a good way. That's why it's there.
Yeah, and you can attempt to steer the course as well, if needed. Yeah, it's a good mechanic in the game that gives the GM a little bit more choice in sometimes in making it a bit more narrative in sending people one way or another, rather than obvious railroading, which is kind of forced in some other systems.
Yeah, and I think if you're an experienced I'd go so far as to say that an experienced GM doesn't really need darkness points, because you can, if you're in touch with the game, you can shift things around to make it more interesting. You don't make it too easy, you don't make it too hard. You will always do that. But I think the darkness points for a less maybe experienced GM could be a really good start. Like, okay, I have a list of things I can throw in their path to make it worse. And this is the cost of doing that. This is my sort of economy of mischief that I can unleash. And I think it's so, and not that an experienced GM can't use it, but I think it's more of a help for people who are new and maybe need a structure on how to properly make, as you said, steer the game or just introduce enough friction into the game to make it interesting.
Yeah. So going on from the darkness, the mysticism and the worship of the icons, in particular 9 icons, which represents a pantheon, is it's ubiquitous within the setting itself. Everybody does it. So it's not just religion is not just in the realms of clerics or religious followers.
Yeah.
That I guess can seem a little bit unusual in a sci-fi game. Where was the thought process behind making that mysticism a part of the setting and a part of the game?
Well, it's the idea came back to why we wanted to highlight again the vulnerability of humans, and one was introducing the world, the dark between the stars and the darkness point mechanic. But we also wanted to show that in the face of all this vast, unknown, and sometimes malicious world, people will also find hope, and they codify it in some sort of religious setting that will help again be enrich the setting, and of course also make the players hopefully want to take part of that. One of my tenets is I want people who stick to the lore, and people who count all the plus ones should do roughly the same thing in the game, right? You want to pray to the icons before you make a jump, and you do that because you get a bonus if you do, and it's also in keeping with the lore. So regardless of how players play the game, they're gonna behave like we propose that people do in this fantasy, which is most people, if not all, are religious or at least spiritual in the face of this vastness. And it also goes back to that some of the conflicts that we wanted to bring to the game when it talks about factions or different generations of people that arrive to the third horizon, some of them have a background in belief, as in, what is this place? What are we doing here? What's important? What's not? What's pure and what's tainted? So all that brings the religious thinking close to some of the conflicts that we want to highlight in the world. So it made sense that everybody more or less is invested in the face of the setting.
It's 20 minutes past. We can go ahead and do a giveaway.
Sure.
Let's go ahead and start with what our tag word should be. Should we just start with Coriolis, because that's where we're at?
You can't start with that because I've got Nightbot running on that.
Oh, okay. Well, what can we start with?
Yeah. We can do exclamation point icons.
Icons. I like icons.
Or exclamation point free league. But yeah, I use Coriolis for Nightbot. Sorry.
Oh no, it's all right. I should have checked first. So let's do icons. I like icons.
Okay,
so if you want to win a PDF copy of the Coriolis rulebook for the third edition, is it, or third horizon?
Coriolis third horizon.
Third horizon. Go ahead and hit exclamation point icons in the chat, and you can win a copy of the book.
Can I pick? There was somebody who asked about a starter kit.
Yes.
There's no starter kit per se for Coriolis, but it's a quick guide available for free. So you can get that and look into what we created, and if it's something for you. Should be enough to get a session out of it, and some feel for if this is a cool thing.
Yeah. We had another question. Is there a particular supplement that you could recommend as a must-have for Coriolis?
A supplement you wanted, or something you need?
A particular like addition to the core book.
Not really. Depends on how you want to play it. We have presented background material and settings and adventures around that to ease if you want to go into that. They're all good. I think the Mercy of the Icons campaign offers a lot of meat for GMs, and you can use that either as is, or you can pick whatever thing you want out of that. The 2 parts have already been released, and the 3rd part is on the way, which is the finale of that. So I tell you
what we can do is I've got the core rule book, and I've got a few supplements, and I've got the 2 parts of the Mercy of the Icons that have been released so far. So if we want to switch to the minicam, please, Dave, and then what I can do is show some of the books, because like I say, they are very high quality and then we can continue chatting while I flick through them. So I'm just going to put that up there. No.
Yeah.
I'll push it up the screen. So I'm trying to interpret sign language, which I'm not very good at. So yeah, I'll flick through the books on the screen, and then we'll continue talking. So just going back on something else that you mentioned, which was the factions. One of the, I guess, the biggest parts of the lore is the Zenithians and the First Come. So the Third Horizon is a new area of space that humanity have expanded into. First Horizon being I guess the Terran area, then the second horizon, which was the first area that humanity expanded into, and then through the use of the portals, the First Come actually arrived in the Third Horizon first, although the Zenith and the Nadir, which was two starships or colony ships that left Earth 1,000 years ago, came second, even though they left beforehand. So there's this sort of wave of expansion through the use of the portals that's overtaken, and it's that Zenithian background arriving on the colony ship has turned up just as an ongoing war has ended in Third Horizon. So, and that again is a main theme of the game. And I've rambled on a bit there, but can you talk around more around those factions?
We wanted to, of course, present the setting that is interesting and has depth. We want to, when we design games, we think of the world as layered, and you can play on certain layers, and you can dig and find new things as you explore the world. So you don't, and again, get away from the idea that you need to read a full book and know everything when you start the game. You can play the game and learn as you go. And the factions is a good way to. It's a good introduction to the conflicts of a setting. They represent ideals or knowledge or a philosophy that looks at the universe in a specific way, and they want specific things done or stop certain things that are getting done. So they all meet on Coriolis, which is a station behind you, Steve, and they all meet up there and they argue, and it's all of those factions is something that the players don't necessarily join, but they can agree with or disagree with or learn of or become enemies of, depending on who they are and what they do. But factions is a good format to show the different beliefs or conflicts in the setting. It's one of the easiest way of doing that, especially when you have a space setting with 30 some star systems in it, which is pretty vast. You can't explain all of it in detail, but you can explain the factions and the players that exist, and you can then move from one star system. One or two of these factions might be going in a hot war, even though in Coriolis they use harsh language and intrigue against each other, but there's no fighting. So these things, that's how we use the factions.
Yeah, so I've just been flicking through the book as you've been talking. So congratulations, Dragon's Fire. You have won a copy of the PDF. So well done. We will do a few more giveaways through the course of the show. But yeah, I've been flicking through the book. So describing the art in here is amazing, as it is in the Cimarron book as well. And of course, we've got some artwork in the OBS backgrounds. The layout of the book is fantastic. It's very easy to use. So, I mean, why don't you talk about your thoughts on the book, Lee? Because I know you had some very good points.
I love the art direction. I love the layout. It's such a beautiful book. I mean, it's just like I'm sitting there, I can just like, oh, this is so pretty. Like my only complaint really about the art direction is when I got to the bestiary, there weren't enough pictures. So more pictures, please. I really loved the whole style into it, and I know you had there's this Middle Eastern influence to it. So I wanted to know if you had these Middle Eastern artists or any artists of these cultures that you're trying to represent do any of the work for the art here. And also we had an audience question from Dragonspire. Is there any particular art piece in the book that is a favorite or inspiring in some way?
There's a lot of great art. A lot of the conflicts in the book are actually based on the reconquest of Spain. So it's sort of a clashes of cultures and also cultures riffing off each other and learning from each other. So a lot of that, a lot of the art draws of, let's say, Alhambra or someplace in Spain, where you can see clearly, Moorish designs and a Christian heritage, and you can also, if you know your Iberian Peninsula, you know that a lot of that stuff were built by Jewish craftsmen. So it's sort of a mix of the big religions and all the philosophies around there, and it's still visible today in that space. And that's the sort of idea we thought about, where how can one culture borrow something and uses this for something else, or inspired by, and even if they fought initially, they might learn and change as a function of that. But there's also, it's not clearly there's a Middle Eastern influence to it, or I would say Spain, 12th, 13th century Spain is probably the most clear initially, but we added other stuff too. There's Art Nouveau in there. If you have an interior picture of the Coriolis station, you will see Paddington Station, I think, somewhere in there. Quite a lot of it. So we want to be inspired by stuff, but not take something entirely. We want to make sure that people recognize it, but it's not a thing. It's a bunch of stuff that you know.
I'm really glad you brought up the Reconquista and Alhambra. I'm Puerto Rican, and there you can actually linearly see the connection from the Alhambra and the Reconquista in the city that my family's from, in Ponce, where you have these buildings on the other side of the world that are inspired by a culture from hundreds of years ago that are still there, that are still being built on the same sort of theme. And you see how the culture carries it from one point to the other, and you can literally trace it back to these periods in time where this happened, where it was a conflict. And the instinct that we have as people, I think, is to sort of reject that which we have a conflict with. But you can actually see, in reality, we tend to embrace it, the things that we like the most about it, and we adapt it to who we are, and it becomes a part of us. And I think that's very thematic with the game that you created at Coriolis.
Yeah, we want to make it. I'm not a historian, but I'm super intrigued by how the Muslim invasion of Europe, and then the reconquest of Spain, and how that actually brought back a lot of philosophies that was lost in Europe at the time, and Aristotle and Plato was found again when because they were still cherished in the among Muslim scholars in Spain at that time, and they were brought back to Europe, and okay, these old guys, we forgot about those. And so it's sort of it's conflict, but it's also a weird sort of nourishment and bouncing off each other. Of course, the conflict part is horrible, but there's also the interlinking of cultures that is really hard to get out of, that we wanted to capture. And so that's actually that was one of the starting points of this. What is this place? It is a place where cultures crash and learn from each other, even if they don't perhaps recognize it, or at least are willing to say it.
No.
So that's one of the underpinnings of how we built this place. Then we add that the dark between the stars, which is more of a horror reference, as in humanity as a whole is pretty small against this backdrop of space.
Mm-hmm.
And so that brings me on to another point. In the second part of the Mercy of the Icons, the last I played, it talks about a new rule being added, which is the terror rule. And it also brings in, for each of the scenes, because we haven't talked about this yet, but the game is actually played in scenes. So it's very easy to imagine that way. And with that game bringing automatic darkness points because of certain things that the characters witness or things that go on. That brings me on to a question that was asked in chat, which is Coriolis uses darkness when players push the dice, or or they're seeing this horrible event and they're getting affected by terror. Narratively, in Alien, that's described because you're becoming stressed. How is that narratively explained in Coriolis?
Well, the dark between the stars is it's a physical fact, even though it's poorly understood. It means that mystics, for instance, you can become a mystic if your cryo chamber is have some defect when you're making a portal jump. You can wake up and have mystical powers or telekinesis or whatever. So there's clearly something beyond what we can see that affects this place, and it's not necessarily a good thing, or at least it's not only a good thing. So that's sort of the narrative backdrop. That there are other things. It's not a hard sci-fi game. There are things you can't explain that seem magical, or maybe even are magical in some sense. They're not necessarily technological, at least, in the human sense of it. So that's actually established as part of this a setting. Possession of dark spirits is something that is clearly going on, whatever the hell that is, right? You maybe don't know what it is, but it's going to happen. And your ship can become cursed, as literally cursed, as it's hard to use it now because there's something on board that's not supposed to be there. And you can't just reboot the computer and be gone with it, right? You might need a priest. So that's in there, and so that's how we tied it in. And we wanted to, so you can, and it's sort of a game balance thing when it comes to pushing rolls, make it easier to succeed in the short term, but you also accumulate darkness points, which is going to make your life miserable in the long term. So that is a check, just like stress in Alien has some, it actually has benefits short term, but you might also lose your shit altogether and just panic. So there's a long-term effect of not doing too much.
Yeah.
And the darkness point has a similar game mechanical thing, but it's tied to the idea that the world, the portal builders, whoever they were, who built the portals that humans use to jump between systems, they also let something else in, or something else is beyond that point. That's why you need to sleep when you jump. You can't be awake. If you're awake, you're gonna turn out weird or possessed or dead. So you need to be on ice.
Yeah.
So you have all of that stuff. There's something between the stars in a physical sense, and that's how we explain the darkness points.
Oh, there was that short story. I can't remember who it was by, about all the families that are going on the trip across the stars, and they tell you have to close your eyes, and it'll only be a second. But if you open your eyes, it's horrible. And then the little boy keeps his eyes open, and it's such a good. Is that an influence on that, or do you have any other sort of literary influences like that?
There are many influences. This is not I would love if it was a unique idea from us, but I think our spin on it, excuse me, has some uniqueness to it. But the idea that there are things beyond what we can see, and these things affect us, is old, very old, and we tied that into the portal jumps, not to make portal jumping too easy. Again, we want the setting to be the whole rationale for why a small crew can make a difference is that portal jumping is hard, and most people avoid it if they need to do strenuous calculations to do it with lower risk. So it's sort of built in as a reason why traveling is not as easy to just jump between systems, because we wanted these choke points around these portals. That's also part of how we think the world is more interesting. Rather, if people can jump from open space to some other system open space, that becomes a very different, not bad, but a very different type of game.
Well, and you also talked about, before we came on, about the whole internal consistency was the term you used. About building a theme and building a setting, and particularly one that is advanced technologies and unlimited energy. How do you have some cost on the the party on just basically going wherever they please, whenever they please, without any costs and without any risk? And I like the way you've built that darkness narrative in there to put that cost in, so it is internally consistent, it is thematic, and having a spaceship does not mean you're ready to rule the world.
Of course, you could counter that by having excessive costs with jumping, right? If you do, you could have, it could be so expensive that you don't do it a lot. But we also wanted, there are two references when it comes to space and space combat, for instance, in Coriolis, that we wanted to bring with us. One is that it's more a game of cat and mouse, and it has more to do with submarine fighting than it has to do with fast spaceship darting in and out and shooting at each other, or at least slow ironclad ships that fire each other at range, not the fast fighter jets or Spitfires or whatever, Second World War.
This is not a dogfight. It's
not dogfighting, exactly. Yeah. So we wanted that, and with that came, we want to have blockades, and if you have portals, you can blockade things. So we wanted these things to be. It's one of those things. How do you limit, in an interesting way, limit a sci-fi game where energy, for instance, as you said, is pretty much unlimited. You need to have some limits, and we think, like in every work of art, the frame blocks the painting and makes the painting better. It just can't go on. There's something that stops it in certain directions, and it's part of the work of art itself. It's not the painting, it's also a framing of it. And some limitations that you can introduce to a setting makes the setting better. Yeah. Where a lack of limitations would just make it harder to play.
Yeah.
This is sort of, I think, the reasoning on that.
So one thing we haven't talked about on some of the mechanics is the classes that you can play. So if you look through the core rule book, there are a number of classes, and there are obviously links with traditional fantasy role-playing classes, but they're all called different things, which I like. You've got the artist, you've got the preacher, you've got the fugitive. You can link that with bard, a cleric, and a rogue. But they're given these different names, and then to go with those character classes, there's the concepts. And I know you, Lee, as well, picked up on the concepts and the sub-concepts as well, which is really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the classes, and particularly, do you have a favourite and why?
I have a weakness for pilots, but generally, no. But the idea, of course, is to make it easy, and it should be rich enough to play different types of characters, but it should be guided enough for players to quickly find what they should do. It should not be. It's a sort of a semi-open system. It's not a class-based, as anyone playing 5e, for instance, would assume it is.
Yep.
It's more of these are the types of characters you can play. These are concepts that play into that, or these are sub-concepts. And we want to place the player in a position to quickly create a character that still fits in the world. So not everything, it's not everything goes. It's all of these things would give you a place in the world that makes sense. Either on the show, as a character,
I really like that. The character creation feels really modern and flexible in a way where you have the pick these options, or make something up, which becomes this blend of the old classic systems that you have in like D&D, and also some of the more modern systems that we talked about. It has a very fresh feel and like a new perspective into having a role-playing game for me.
Yeah.
And again, the whole individual character creation is still driven towards the group being involved in making that decision with you, because you can play as a human, and you can play as a human, and mostly it drives you to playing as a human. There are humanites, which are bio sculpted, but if you play as a humanite, you'll gain a take it, which is part of the whole social mechanic of the game. And then you can play as a semi-intelligence, which is one of the three alien races. But again, the game book says to have that conversation with your team, have that conversation with your GM, and make sure everybody is comfortable with that. Because if you look at the thickness of the Mercy of the Icons, but you're going to be playing this game for a long time, and you need to be, as Lee said before we came on, you need to be comfortable with that. You need to be moving in one direction as a group and not having the internal conflicts, because narratively, if you have an internal conflict on the spacecraft and you're in the middle of space, it's going to go bad.
And we like to introduce, not everybody is into it, but we like if you can introduce social disparities into the game group as part of the game world not being particularly just. We like to do that because, again, as long as it's an informed player choice to play let's say a semi-intelligence, you can play that, but you're not going to be the leader of the group because nobody's going to take you seriously, unless you're friends and other semi-intelligences. So you can pick that if you want to, and explore that feeling of being seen as someone who's not really capable. Recognize that.
Yeah.
So we want to have those aspects of the world, and we know this is sensitive stuff and we need to handle it with care. We think it fits into a world that tries to, as you say, be not realistic. That's not the point. It's the internal consistency. People have ideas, and some of these ideas are really weird and mean to people, and they don't change easy. They don't go away just by saying they should go away, right? So we want to have that stuff in there. But again, then you need to talk to the group, and the GM and the player need to know what they're doing. But then it sort of works. There's a cool question here from the Shuchata, who seems to be asking a bunch of stuff about Earth religions and influences in the icon work. We'll talk a bit about that.
Go ahead and ask, is it detailed if any of the Earth religions have influenced the setting or why they have been discarded for icon worship?
Yes. I think that we've discarded the Earth religions because we don't need them to do what we want, but they need to be, but when you make something up, it needs to be relatable to people on Earth right now. So it can't be too far removed, I think, because then it won't make any sense. So you can mix icons it's from the Orthodox Church, mostly doing icons. So we stole it from that. So thank you, Orthodox Church. But it's not the way they do it. And it's not meant to be a reference on the Orthodox Church. But we wanted something that we think we can relate to and we can understand. And this idea that just like saints represent something more specific than this great idea of spirituality, but they're more concrete. We thought it was a good idea to introduce faith in the game, and we needed faith in the game. So that's why it became that. But we're not really mirroring any faith that exists on Earth today. That's not really the point. But it needs to be close to it needs to have the same function and be relatable, I think, otherwise it won't be the best.
So one of the other things that's included in the setting lore, and there is a lot of lore, and as you said, you don't need the lore to play the game, which is great, but it is there if you are interested. There's a lot of lore in the core rulebook. One of the things I like it talks about, it has it in like short little paragraphs, and it leaves enough ambiguity in there that if you want to pick up on that as a GM, you can build your own thing in there. And one of the supplements I like is the Atlas Compendium, because you get the map that's in the background here, and within the Atlas Compendium itself you get more expanded lore on each of the well, not every planet, but enough of the planets where you've got somewhere to go if you want to just play by the lore that's in the book. There's a timeline in there, and then in the back of the book there are cards, and you create your own systems. Again, so as a homebrew GM, there's everything there to go away and create your own galaxy if you want. The timeline talks about the movement from the first horizon, second horizon into the third horizon. It talks about the emissaries. We haven't discussed emissaries yet, but obviously they're an important part of the game, and in particular, an important part of the campaign. So can you talk a little bit about an emissaries?
Well, the third horizon, as the game, the default starting point of the third horizon is the, as you said, the arrival of the Zenith, the generational ship. And the people who have been there, the first who have been there for a long time, have just finished the war, just a bunch of years ago, and they blew up a bunch of these portals to cut off the third horizon from the first horizon, which to end the war.
Yeah.
So many of the portals are waking up, and the third horizon again start to trade and have conflict with each other. But the first horizon is walled off through destroyed portals, because that was sort of the main enemy of that. The second horizon have no direct connection to the third, so you can't jump. You can't take your ship. Not even in the old days when all the portals were working, you had to go through the first horizon to get to the second from the third. But the emissaries are something else. They show up in a gas giant, and they have a message, which again shakes up the political landscape on Coriolis, and all the factions have an idea or an opinion about these emissaries, whether they are good, bad, or frauds. So they sort of kick off the campaign, and they bring the wider world and the horizons, the other horizons, into the third horizon again.
Yeah,
in more or less concrete ways.
I had a question about that because maybe it was just me not understanding what I was reading, because I was just trying to get so into it. But did it seem to me like there was not a lot of information about the war in the third horizon, and that people didn't remember a lot about it, even though it didn't seem like that long ago? Or is that me not understanding what's happening?
It's more that a lot of people died.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the groups that exist avoided the war or retreated into systems that they then closed off.
Okay.
So they maybe don't know as much. Actually, they know that outside forces and fifth column forces tried to take over the third horizon, and it was clearly the first horizon who was the main enemy. So
okay.
And a lot of the people that populated the third horizon were free thinkers or religious minorities that felt oppressed and fled to the third horizon in the first place to avoid coming under the heavy thumb on the first horizon. So that's that, and everybody knows that, but it's not really clear exactly what happened, and entire factions and planets were wiped out during the war, so not everybody knows exactly.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a sort of not a dark age, but slightly coming out of a dark age where there are rumors more than fact in some faction of it.
And that ties back into the Alhambra and the Reconquista, and it's all circular. Yes. I love that.
Okay, we're going to do the best question giveaway. So if we can choose who asked the best question and who was the runner-up. So the best question will receive the physical copy of the Coriolis rulebook, and the runner-up will receive PDF copy. So if you would like to choose the winner for us, please, Matt, and then we'll get the details going, and then we can talk a little bit about the core rulebook. I'll show that. It is
there are several good questions, I think, but I think Shukshata gave us at least 2 really good questions, maybe more. I haven't gone through the entire chat, so I think maybe that's the winner.
Congratulations, Shukshata.
Yeah.
Great questions. Yeah.
Right, so Chata, if you can whisper Band of Badgers in chat, please. We'll collect your details, and yeah, congratulations. you have won the physical copy of the Coriolis rulebook. That is a big book. So there is everything in there that you need to start playing this game, and it is worth it. It really is. I've picked this up in 2019, the end of 2019 at Dragon Meet, and have yet not played it because I really wanted to play this at a table. But as time goes on, they're going to play it on the stream, so we'll see. But yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to playing this. Have been for a long time.
A runner-up could be, I guess, Dragon's Fire.
Well, she already won a copy.
She did.
Nothing against her.
Pile it up. Well, then I think Baron Snowhand for sure. And
yeah.
The copy, I think, right?
Yeah, we didn't get to actually ask one of his questions, but I want to ask it now. And what is your favorite space monster of all time? Because I'm curious about that too.
Ooh, that's hard. I mean, it's hard to not say the Xenomorph Aurelian, I think.
Well, yeah.
It scared me like mad. I saw the first movie way too young. Never got over it.
So Dave and I watched those films together.
Yeah.
So,
I think there's lots of them, but I think there's a lot of funny monsters in Star Wars, but I don't view them as they're more fun than. Now it had to be the Xenomorph.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So just going back on the campaign books, there's 2 out currently. It is trilogy, so there will be a 3rd part coming, and you're actually writing on that, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm part of developing that. Yes.
So if you don't mind me, how far are you? Is it in concept stage? Have you started writing?
It's actually Rickard and Troya making most of the heavy lifting on that one when it comes to writing, and he's got we're past the concept stage and he's actually writing, so we're sending stuff back and forth. We've even some early work with the maps and talking about illustrations and cover and all that. Yeah. But it's gonna be late this year, or more realistically early next year, I think, before we can launch anything. So some sort of Kickstarter or maybe a pre-order will be past summer sometime. I'm not sure. Probably a pre-order, since it's a campaign book, but we'll see. But that's the sort of time frame we'll have to get back on that.
So I mean, in the 2 current books, there are some beautiful maps. I mean, even the map in the front cover, which is of Kua, which is sort of, I guess, the main planet in Coriolis. This is where the Coriolis space station is located. It's a beautiful map on the front cover. There are some beautiful artwork within, and the battle maps that are contained in the book itself, or the location maps, the scene maps, they are beautifully hand drawn. Just the work in the book is just excellent. The way it's laid out, the sidebar notes, everything very easy to use, and I love the concept of doing the scene. It really makes it easy to break the sessions up and to break the campaign up. Now, I did mention earlier about the terror rule coming in the 2nd book, which is the last cyclade. Is that a conscious decision that you're going to carry through into the 3rd book? Are you going in more a horror direction?
It's going to end up with the 3rd book is the campaign finale, so there will have to be some resolution to that. There will be horror elements continued. Whether the heroes triumph or not, well, I guess everybody will have to play to find out what their version of history will be. But there's always a lot of, you have to converge. You can diverge quite a lot early on in a campaign, but you'll have to divert converge at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So some sort of big bang climactic release there will happen. It's not going to turn brighter and more lighthearted. That's for sure.
Yeah. I'm trying to stay away from talking about some of the elements that's in it and the stories that's in it without giving any spoilers away. So it makes it difficult to talk about some of the specific parts. But I guess one of the things I really liked about it was some of your other products. So there's the Last Voyage of the Ghazali, which is around a ship that falls into the sun, and it's set in the Toan system, which is one of the systems or one of the planets in Coriolis. That actually links into the adventure. That actually is part of the whole story and leads into the start of the campaign.
Yeah, you don't have to play it, but it sets the stage for the campaign and puts the players on the PCs on the path.
Yeah.
So there's it's a sort of an unofficial first part of that.
Yeah, my minicam has died, so I apologise for that. So no more showing of the pictures. I don't know why it's dropped. I can fix that. Lee, have you got any questions? While I
Sure. I got a question off of Reddit about some of the music pieces that you recommend for game ambience, and the intro music that we had. Oh my God, that was so cool. That was a lot of fun. And then they also wanted to know if there's any bits they'd really have in your home games that you would want to put in the books. There anything that got cut basically and decided not to, and didn't end up in the book that you would have wanted but didn't make it.
No, I think it's a good question because there usually is, but in the case of Coriolis, it's not. It's that the core book is a hefty volume, and the campaign books are pretty packed as well. So not really. We had to leave some stuff out actually that we wanted to do, and I want to just highlight the fact that we have awesome fans that they created a community atlas for the Third Horizon that's on Free League Workshop, which is a fantastic book. It expands on the atlas that we released. So there's more to it. So if you want to really get lost in the Third Horizon, but that's not really the point of an atlas, is it? You want to add more content to your Third Horizon and have more, you can check that out. It's an awesome community to get into. So the community atlas Free League Workshop is highly recommended.
Let's see, what else did we have? We had some fun. Oh, here's another one that we had. Was there anything space related that you learned while creating Coriolis that you found particularly cool?
I'm a bit of a space geek, so I was already quite into some facts about our own star system and galaxy before I started. The challenge was more not to make it a astrophysics primer, because that's sort of not the point. So we wanted to keep the playing at the forefront and not thinking physics. So we and of course the fantasy elements in the form of portals and Dark Between the Stars made it easier, since they're not necessarily current day physics, at least. I don't know if there's anything that maybe the size comparison of stars never ceases to amaze me. Like,
yeah,
I think there's a bunch of stars, they're probably the same. And then you look into it like, ooh, this is huge. And of course there's specific things where there seem to be filaments in space where, since the stars don't cluster evenly, if it was totally random, all stars would probably lie at even distances from each other. That'd be the most likely outcome, and they absolutely are not. So there are voids between the galaxies where there are no galaxies, with just darkness, which blows my mind. So there are things about our own universe that that's really cool, but not all of it got translated. We didn't want a sort of a hard sci-fi game. We wanted just enough science in there to feel like it could happen, and then add some fantasy on that. So
we had another question that if you had to compare Coriolis to a song, what would it be?
To a song
or a soundtrack? What's the music? Talk about the music. Yeah.
I'd take Peter Gabriel's Passion soundtrack.
Ooh.
And then I'd put some beats on it.
Some beats.
Yeah.
That's an interesting
some lo-fi beats on it.
Lo-fi beats to Peter Gabriel. Yeah, I was.
It's fantastic. It's for the Passion of it's called the Passion of the Christ. It's about the Passion of the Christ, and he made the soundtrack totally. There's no singing or just no vocal. They're vocalized, but no words on it. It's an amazing soundtrack. There are many good ones, but that's one of my favorite when I write. So, but that with a lo-fi beat would be very Coriolis for me.
Yeah, I can see that. It has that, when we were listening to the intro music we were talking about, it has that really 80s sort of synthwave vibe, but it also has the Middle Eastern influences.
Exactly. I mean, the whole idea of space as the ultimate desert, I think, permeates how we think about Coriolis quite a lot.
That's a really good explanation, actually, and I didn't mention that when you were talking about it at the beginning of the show when you talked about Oasis, but that is very true. You know, you've got what is in effect a massive desert, and some of these planets that are inhabitable are oases.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to make them, colorful, and this is where the water is, and you can rest, and there's some safety there because the desert of space is not kind to you or your ship.
Yeah,
so that was one of the ideas of goes through the art in the world quite a lot.
I think that's probably how we envision things as well, because you're talking about the vastness of space and this, how fast stars are in relative terms, how big they are, and it's a difficult concept to picture. And these spaces between that are completely unfilled, that on an old fantasy map you'd draw a dragon and you'd write "here be dragons" on it, and it's the same concept, and it's that similar concept, and that's what makes it, I think, approachable and not something that becomes too hard, as you described, too complex, too off-putting. It's approachable because although it is sci-fi, it's very based in even real world terms to a certain extent. Everything is relatable.
I
mean, that's I think is when you create games or art, you need to stay within the realm of people need to be able to associate what you do, or you don't have to. You can do whatever you want. But if you want people to enjoy it in a larger scale, especially in type of a game, because if you take some other setting, you get a lot for free. But if you do sci-fi can be almost anything. Fantasy is often pretty conventional and runs along certain assumptions that make it very easy, but sci-fi can be a lot of stuff. So you need to help people get a frame of reference, and so we didn't want to stray too far. The portals are practical for lots of reasons in the game because they limit travel, but they're also based on the idea of wormholes that most people who are, slightly interested in space have at least encountered the idea of. And then we added that in those wormholes, there's something dark that wants to break in that can hurt you in the dark. So you can combine concepts that people know or have an idea of and have novel combinations, but the amount of totally novel things should probably be pretty low if you want people to quickly get a grasp of what you're doing. Then you can introduce the weirdness over time.
Yeah.
People get used to it. So it's not always easy, but it's always fun.
Go ahead. Steve?
No, go on. Well, I was just going to mention that we've got another PDF giveaway running in chat now. So if you enter with exclamation mark Gabriel, as in Peter Gabriel, then you can stand a chance of winning the PDF copy of the core rulebook that we gave away earlier. So I just want to get that in so we can get that running.
Yeah. We had a question from Effect Podcast who wants to know why you went with 16 skills when most other games have 12.
Yeah, most other 3D games actually have 12 based on 3 skills and 4 abilities and then a bunch of talents. We felt that a sci-fi game would benefit from a wider range of skills, meaning that there are more specialists in a sort of advanced society than maybe a fantasy game. I'm honestly not sure if it really helped or it works, but I'm not sure we had to do it. We could have done it with more talents. So it's do you put something as a specialty and a talent, or do you create a skill? So I'm not really sure that if I'm not unhappy with it. I just don't. I think, but clearly what we were after was the idea that an advanced society has a high degree of specialization, so everybody cannot know everything, and still have the feeling of a diverse world with lots of knowledge where everybody knows stuff. That's where it came from. That's why we decided for the extra 4.
Yeah. One of the things we haven't spoken about is advancement. And advancement is done really well, I think. Again, driving home the collaborative approach of the whole game throughout the theme. At the end of the session, you sit down and discuss how things went, and actually you get awarded points based on taking part in the session. Did you advance your character? Did you take a risk? Did you learn something about somebody else's PC? And when you've got five points, you advance a level, so you can advance in a skill, you can get new talent, and I think that's a great idea. Again, simple. What was the inspiration behind that concept?
It was carried over from Mutant Year Zero, where I think it first was used, and we really liked it. It's again sort of interactive, and it highlights that you can do different things to get experience. It goes back to did you help your buddy, or did you have a rival? Did you do anything to challenge or make life harder for your rival, and suddenly did you? So you can do all of these things with those questions that I think is cool. A challenge that we had and do have with Coriolis, as you do with any game with lots of tech, is how much progression should you put on the tech and how much should you put on the PCs? Yeah. And if you allow them to stack freely, how do you maintain balance? Since PCs generally become more skilled, get more money and better tech at the same time. So it's sort of an exponential race towards invisibility, sort of invulnerability.
Yeah.
So, but I think we came off pretty good in Coriolis. You can play for a long time and not be godlike. What I think is and still feel that you progress. You get better stuff and you become better at using it.
Talking about becoming invulnerable, Lee, did you want to ask your question about the death rules? Because again, that's something we were talking about before we came on.
I loved the way you put in rules about death and disability. It was something you were talking about earlier. And it feels like the way you designed your critical injury chart, they're more like a failure. It's you have to like really badly hurt yourself to actually die. You have to actually get critically injured. But even then, it's not a guarantee that your character's dead. And there are some systems where it just feels like TPK is built into how the system works, and that's what they're gunning for. But this, it seems like it's designed to limit character death and to keep people playing. not to say that there aren't consequences for getting seriously injured or losing all your HP or even getting a critical injury that's not lethal.
Yeah.
But it's I thought it was a really interesting way to keep the story going without losing characters.
I mean, it's a game philosophy, and try to understand how people play. And I'm pretty sure most people don't like dying in our role play games. And the more they invest in a character, the less they want to die. And it's not. So the question is, how do you make the game interesting then, if the stakes are not life and death? While you make life complicated in a way where the story becomes interesting when things hit, when the shit hits the fan, right? So you want the ship to be badly damaged and drifting, dead in space, basically, and then try to have the PCs to save it. And they get hurt. Your buddy gets hurt, or someone else gets hurt, really hurt bad, but they don't necessarily die. They can, but it's a feature, I think, of many free league games that character death is not prevalent unless you want it to be. There are other games where it fits really nice. But not necessarily more narrative games like we are after. I mean, if I did a one-off with Coriolis, I'd change the rules so you could die more easily. That'd make more sense if you're not going to play for a long time. But if you're investing a lot into the game and playing campaigns and whatnot, I think over time, even the games that come out of old school, they've changed the rule for death tremendously. So character death is way less prevalent than it was in the 70s or early 80s. You died all the time for nothing you could even remotely, you have no control of it. It was a random encounter and you're just gone.
Right.
And that's I'm not saying it's a bad way of playing. It's just not a very modern way to design a game system. And very few people today play like that, even in D&D, which is I think, prime opponent of that.
Yeah.
Or not opponent, but they had that system. They built that system and they used it for a long time. Just your HP is gone, you're dead. Roll up a new character. They don't do that anymore, and they haven't for decades. And I don't think very many people want to play like that.
But I think it makes character death actually more meaningful when you do it this way, because it's actually a serious consequence of the thing. Lots of bad things can happen to you before you die. Like it's this long list of stuff that could happen, but it still could happen. But I also think it opens a doorway into an idea of a character sacrificing themselves or like purposely putting them in the way of danger. Like if I've got my best friend with me, maybe I throw myself in front of the bullet so that I die and they don't, or I take the hit for them. And that to me builds up a lot more of a good interpersonal connection that brings an interesting dynamic to things. And one of the things you were talking about is the ship gets damaged, the ship gets hurt. One of the things I really love that I actually didn't put down as a question is that the ship itself actually becomes a character that is designed by the group, and you get really invested in it. The way it works.
An early version that we drafted was that the ship could almost not be destroyed, but characters could die quite easily. So the ship was sort of the carrier of the group, and so crews come and go, but ships stay. But it was a bit harsh. So we rolled back on that, but absolutely that the ship is a character. You have a ship from the beginning, and you can improve on it over time, and it's a shared love-hate affair for the players, because it always has a quirk that's gonna pop up at least at any time when you don't really want it to. It's gonna pop up and make your life miserable. But so that you're absolutely right. I think that's an important part of Coriolis is the ship.
Yeah. Oh, we did have a winner for our giveaway. You will never know. Congratulations. Good job.
Yep.
Thank you.
Congratulations. So I think Dave's already reached out anyway, so we'll leave it there. Thank you, David, for taking care of that. So we're gonna wrap up there. thank you again for tuning in. Please, if you have the opportunity to play this or pick up any of the supplements, and there are many, we have scenario compendiums, which are great little scenes to just run as one shots or to include as side quests in a large campaign if you're home brewing. We've got one shots. This is a dying ship one shot. There are other adventures slightly bigger, the last voyage of the Xali. There are the campaign books, and as we said, Matt is working on part 3, which is concluding part Mercy of the Icons. So I'm going to try and get a spoiler out of you. Do you have a name yet?
No. That's actually true. Names are interesting on projects. It's usually that you pick a name because you need one, and then you get used to it yourself, so you don't change it.
Yeah.
And you launch with that name. I'm actually one of those who prefer to have, like, you should have like lemon yogurt, whatever. You call it something that you know you're not going to launch with, so you know you need to get a good name. Yeah. Right. Otherwise, you're going to pick a name early, and then it sticks forever, and the team is used to it, and it might make no sense to anyone else. So no, we haven't picked one. We just call it part 3. That's the,
okay. Oh, I was looking forward to
right now. So, but I will have to announce it sometime. So we have some suggestions, but we haven't decided yet.
Okay. So yeah, keep an eye on that. The Free League website link is in chat. It's been coming up in chat throughout the course of tonight's Q&A session. As Matt said earlier on, if you would like to try Coriolis, you can download the. It's not a starter kit. It was the quick guide. That was it. Sorry, which has enough in there to get you started playing and at least get you into the game. It is slightly different mechanic. It's not a D20 mechanic, so if you're used to 5e, it will feel different. However, it's so easy to learn. So the Alien RPG uses the same mechanic. I learned how to play the Alien RPG during a podcast at Dragon Meet in about 10 minutes. It's that easy. You roll d6s, 6s win. There's no maths. It's easy to get into. But there is so much depth to this game, so please try the quick guide and then go and buy the core rule book. There is everything in there you need to. Even if you don't play it, just read it. There's so much information in there. I can't, the product is worth the money.
It's cool too.
It is very cool.
It's just cool.
It's cool.
Even if you never play it, it's just fun to read. Like
it's fun to just have on the shelf, bring it down, look at the artwork, read the lore. There's just so much in there. It's yeah. If you're into Alistair Reynolds novels, if you're into Ian M. Banks novels, it would be right up your street.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thank you very much, Matt, for joining us. Thank you again, Lee, for co-hosting. Well, just hosting, not co-hosting, just hosting. And thank you, Dave, for producing in the background. Grats to everybody who won this evening. Grats to I'm gonna get the name horribly wrong. who won the physical charter? Who won the physical book? Hope you enjoy it. We're going to wrap up there. This is the Band of Badgers channel. Thank you very much, and good night.
Right.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.